endless gray fog hung silently before a light scraping noise on the bronze table sounded. Klein changed his seating posture and began placing more weight on the details regarding the evil spirit. He was more and more convinced that Miss Sharon and himself had neglected the possibility of something happening to Rafter Pound. This is a beyond power of the Red Priest pathway, conspiracy. Furthermore, this is even closer to common fraud. There's only the use of supernatural powers in the detail. Therefore, even if I had arrived at the mysterious space above the gray fog, I would passively have my senses fooled. I would have only discovered the problem by proactively considering and analyzing the situation. If it wasn't for Mr. Azek, who knew of the evil spirit suspected to be the dead Red Angel Medici, I wouldn't have realized this problem. Nor would I have hired Miss Magician to seek out any abnormalities on William Street. After a few minutes of contemplation, Klein conjured a pen and paper, preparing to use divination to confirm his theory. After deliberating for a moment, he finally penned the sentence for the dream divination: Baronet Rafter Pound's current situation. After putting down his dark red fountain pen, Klein held the piece of paper with the divination statement and leaned back in his chair. He first recalled the information he had regarding Rafter Pound before closing his eyes, chanting silently, and entering cogitation. Klein's thoughts rapidly calmed down as he quickly entered a dream state. A gray world, disconnected scenes flashed past before finally fixating on Unit 29 on Civilouse Street. Inside the warm activity room, Rafter Pound was dressed in cotton pajamas, holding a wine cup with red liquid. He was standing silently by the window, looking at the Backland police station headquarters diagonally across the street. This baronet had gray sideburns and puffy eye sockets that were tainted with blackish-green color. The wrinkles on his forehead and the corners of his eyes and mouth were so pronounced that it exceeded what someone in his 40s should look like. His pupils weren't dilated in a very serious manner, but they were abnormal. His cheeks were flushed red as he had a furtive smile. He looked slightly abnormal compared to the last time Klein met him. Indeed, something is wrong with him. Klein left the dream and began considering how he could deal with the evil spirit. Without a doubt, he had his usual train of thought for such matters. Under the situation where he was unable to contact Miss Sharon, his first reaction was to report the matter. But how should it be reported? Klein considered it seriously and conjured the world's figure and made him pray. Through a reliable channel, pass this information to the Church of the Evernight Goddess and the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. The information is, high-level spies from FASEC and Intis are gathered at William Street for unknown motive. Reward of £100. This was the explanation Klein thought of after repeated consideration. Directly revealing the King of Angels, Red Priest, the Medici family, or the Tudor dynasty's ruin would indeed garner the attention of the churches and military, but it would also easily make Miss Magician, who reported the matter, to be targeted by the official organization. There were huge risks involved. Not only was using high-level spies from FASEC and Intis are gathered at William Street relatively milder, something which ordinary Beyonders had a chance of noticing, but it was also something that would make the churches and the military wary. They would send out the corresponding experts to employ the most effective method. As for the subsequent fruits of the investigations, it was all thanks to their contributions and had nothing to do with the reporting party. Klein had considered getting Mr. Azek to help, but he ultimately chose to abandon the thought. This was because the evil spirit was suspected to be a king of angels and was very dangerous. Mr. Azek, who was still in the stage of recovering, might not be able to deal with it. After some thought, Klein turned the conjured scene into a stream of light and transmitted it to the Crimson Star representing the magician. Backland Sherwood Borough. When Forbes received the response from Mr. World, she was taken aback. Those are high-level spies from FASEC and Inti, she exclaimed to herself, believing that there was no way she could have inferred something like that with the information she had provided. However, she quickly felt at ease, believing that the reason why Mr. World had suspicions of abnormalities in William Street was precisely because he had received the corresponding intel of high-level spies. Once he confirmed the appearances of people from FASEC and Intis, it was easy for him to make such a conclusion. Pass this information to the Church of Evernight and the Church of Steam. Isn't that a euphemistic way of saying report? Unfortunately, I won't be able to watch from the sideline, or I'm sure a great show would unfold. Forbes wasn't a stranger to reporting matters. After all, her housemate and good friend was a bounty hunter. She quickly had an idea, deciding to hand the matter of reporting the intel to the experienced Zio. When she came out of the bedroom, she saw Zio sitting on a sofa. She was flipping through documents about her target, raising her hand to grab at her messy blonde hair from time to time, and appearing extremely serious. Forrest casually picked up an item to embellish her motives and came over to the sofa. She handed over the item. "Here, have a piece of cake." Zio glanced at the cake slathered with a layer of cream. Without losing focus, she raised her hand to grab it. At this moment, Forrest flipped her wrist, and the cake in her palm had turned into a golden decorative flower. "Surprised?" she asked with a smile. Zio couldn't help but roll her eyes. "Stop your performance. I prefer food." "All right. I have a matter for you to do." £70. For smiled as she sat down. After first dealing with the evil spirits matter, Klein returned to the real world and held a ritual in passing. He brought the radio transceiver, which had been placed above the gray fog for several days, back to his first-class master bedroom. He lay in bed and used cogitation to recover his energy until he was awoken by the tapping sound. When Klein opened his eyes, the crimson moonlight had already shone in, blanketing the dim room like a veil, as well as the radio transceiver which was automatically spewing out illusory white paper. "This really feels like a horror film. A shame it's connected to a magic mirror without any moral integrity or bottom line." Klein sat up and walked over. He saw lines of Lonese on the illusory white paper. "Honorable existence above the spirit world, your loyal and humble servant, Arrows, has arrived and would like to greet you. Do you have something you would like to test me on? Look at this look. This is what I call smooth talking. This is what a professional is like." In that instant, Klein really wished to pull Darkwill into the room to witness the magic mirror's art of communication. "I clearly have questions to ask it, but it becomes a situation of me testing it." And it even threw in a question. Klein controlled the curling of his mouth as he replied in a deep voice, "Yes. Please speak." "The ignorant and limited Arrows is ready." Amidst the tapping sounds, the illusory paper no longer produced Lonese, but instead produced a fawning smiley face. "This is already the emergence of emoticons. This fellow evolves really quickly," Klein directly asked. "Where can I obtain a mystical item which can steal the beyonder powers of others?" The tapping sounds suddenly became intense, as the illusory white paper quickly produced scenes like a screenshot from a movie. There were places which Klein was familiar with, such as Tingen City St. Selena Cathedral's Channy's Gate, the black-haired, green-eyed, handsome poet, Leonard Mitchell, a middle-aged man who sat on a sofa smiling at the noble ladies opposite him, and a young arrogant lady who was loitering in the sewers. There were a total of 12 scenes, and finally a line of Lonese text appeared. "These are the ones that you can easily or conveniently acquire one from. There are a lot more, but they are either very complicated or troublesome, or they range at the highest levels which I cannot see clearly." "Not bad. He actually knows to help me filter. This is a fantasy and mystical version of Google." Klein gently nodded and said, despite knowing the answer, "It's your turn to ask." "You have already answered." Amidst the tapping, Arrows's unsurprising answer appeared on the illusory white paper. Klein chuckled inwardly and asked, "Where will Leonard Mitchell be staying for the time being?" The tapping sounds became intense again, as one scene after another appeared before Klein's eye. It was a famous landmark in Backland, a towering Gothic bell tower with a bell of order hanging above. There was a road sign on the road with the words Pinster Street. It was Unit 7, along a row of terrace houses. In it, there was the extremely suave Leonard Mitchell, wearing a black coat and red gloves. He was Klein's poet friend, who was reading through the dossiers of Lanevis and Cappan. "This fellow is in Backland, and he's investigating the Lanevis and Cappan cases." "What the hell?" The corners of Klein's mouth twitched slightly, as he carefully thought of the clues he left behind in those two cases. "The only clue is that Detective Sherlock Moriarty is involved in the two cases. If Leonard enters Daisy's dream, he should discover this point. But I already kept a beard and had a pretty good disguise back then. It's unlikely that he can recognize me in the rather blurry scene in the dream and portraits. As long as he doesn't recognize me, it doesn't matter. What has problems with Sherlock Moriarty have to do with me, J.M. and Sparrow?" Klein retracted his thoughts and memorized Leonard Mitchell's current residence. 7 Pinster Street, Backland. He planned on entrusting the Moon Emlyn White to visit Leonard Mitchell the day after tomorrow, and use the badge of the Hermits of Fate to purchase a mystical item. I hope my dear poet friend has additional items to spare. If not, the price will definitely be at a premium. Klein tersely answered and said to the radio transceiver, "It's your turn to ask." He was honestly curious as to what Arrows would ask this time. Amidst the clacking sounds, the radio transceiver spewed out new illusory paper. On it was a question composed in Lonese. "Great Master, Leonard Mitchell has a huge secret. Do you wish to know?" This can also be considered a question. Klein raised his head in amusement and surprise as he looked at the crimson moon, which was silently illuminating the dark sea. Soon he honestly gave an answer. "Yes." Amidst the clacking sounds, the radio transceiver spewed out a brand new piece of illusory white paper under the crimson moonlight in the dim environment. Inside Leonard Mitchell resides an angel from the Zoroast family. He once changed my question. Angel? There's an angel residing in Leonard's body. An angel from the fourth epoch's Zoroast family. Although Klein was mentally prepared to hear an incredible secret, he was still shocked by what Arrows divulged. He was deeply concerned and surprised as well. An angel referred to Beyonders at sequence 1 or 2, making them rather close to the state of a true god. They had all sorts of mystical characteristics, and they could even influence low-sequence Beyonders of the same pathway to a certain extent and range. They were mighty figures who stood at the pinnacle of the real world. In the various churches, only their popes, pontiffs, chief shepherds, as well as certain legendary ascetics were grounded angels. Therefore, Klein believed that being latched onto by a parasite of this level wasn't a good thing. In the dark second epoch, the angels all had their divine names, and they were subsidiaries to the ancient gods. I haven't indirectly or directly interacted with many angels: Blasphemer Ammon, Calamity Queen Kohainam, the evil spirit suspected to be Red Angel Medicai, Tail Devourer Ouroboros as described by Little Sun, Miracle Invoker Zaratol from Roselle's Diaries, Son of the Creator Adam, Hermes who cannot be confirmed if he's an angel or not, Snake of Fate, Will Ossip, who's still inside his mother's womb. Apart from the last two, the others appear to be very evil. Even the words they leave behind might make the reader go crazy or lose control. Would my dear poet ultimately end up as a sacrificial item of this angel parasite? This can explain why he thinks of himself as the protagonist of a play, the special one, and he was willing to help me hide my secret. The Zoroast family is in control of the Marauder pathway, which is the pathway that can steal the Beyonder powers of others. That's why Leonard was able to find and participate in the gathering of the Hermits of Fate. It's no wonder he offered to use Blood Vessel Thief. It's because he has a grandpa. To help him, he was able to instantly steal Megos's most potent power hat. What Hermits of Fate? They're just a bunch of thieves and frauds. At best, the target of their theft and fraud is that of time and fate. In short, my dear poet's grandpa isn't a good person. I have to find a chance to warn him, but here comes the problem: they're always together. Any warning will only expedite the problem. Klein's thoughts raced, but he ultimately failed to come up with an option he can act upon. All he could do was temporarily shelve the matter and plan on asking Mr. Azek and Snake of Mercury, Will Ossipton, to see if they had any solution. In those few minutes, he even thought of using Blasphemer Ammon. To put it simply, it was to divulge information to the son of the Creator that the angel from the Zoroast family was residing in Leonard Mitchell's body, getting him to eat up the parasite. According to what Klein knew, the Ammon family supported the Tudor Empire during the Fourth Epoch, while the Zoroast family belonged to the Solomon Empire, making the two enemies. Furthermore, according to the law of Beyonder characteristics conservation, powerhouses from the same pathway would have greater conflicts the higher their sequence was. This was akin to the battle between the two snakes of Mercury. Unfortunately, this solution was restricted by reality and was ultimately abandoned by Klein. This was because he didn't know where to find Blasphemer Ammon. Secondly, he was afraid that the battle at the level of angels would directly destroy Leonard Mitchell. And thirdly, a powerful Ammon might be a very bad and serious matter. I'll first get Emlyn to attempt the transaction and observe the actual situation. I can decide on what to do when I know more. Klein retracted his thoughts and said to the radio transceiver which was connected to Arrows, "Ask your question." The clacking of the radio transceiver became increasingly brisker as the illusory white paper was gently spewed out. No, there's no need. This is an addendum to my question, which doesn't need to abide by the rule. Great Master, I sense a special item outside your room, but I am unable to see through it. Can you tell me what it is? This magic mirror is impressive. It seems to be able to see everything. It just suffers from interference when it deals with high-level matters, as though there's a mosaic, Klein calmly replied. Die of probability. Amidst the taping sounds, Arrows presented new words on the illusory piece of white paper. So it's that thing, great master, you can ask your question. Klein thought for a moment before saying, what do you have to mention regarding the die of probability? At this point in time, the radio transceiver seemed to brighten up and no longer looked as gloomy as before. The speed at which illusory white paper spewed out slowed down. TT's a fellow that's especially petty and bears grudges. Master, you have to quickly give it to someone else. TT's an item formed from the uniqueness of the Wheel of Fortune. You can give it to any other snake of fate, and they will be very grateful. In short, it's not suitable to be your servant. The aura is dissipating. Your loyal and humble servant, Arrows, has no choice but to lead. Finally, let me praise you once again, my great master, the ruler above the spirit world. Bye-bye, uniqueness. The die of probability is actually the uniqueness of the monster pathway. This is the first time I'm encountering a so-called uniqueness. It really is terrifying that can digitize the entire real world. The monster pathway is also called the Wheel of Fortune pathway. Sequence 0 is the Wheel of Fortune. Klein looked at the radio transceiver which had returned to normal, and he temporarily reined in his thoughts. He didn't harbor any greed towards the die of probability. This was because it wasn't part of the seer pathway, and it came with extremely terrifying negative side effects. He was also afraid that, with time, this die which bore grudges would attract tailed devourer Ouroboros over. Even if this thing can be isolated and sealed when placed above the gray fog, there's a high chance of it digitizing the entire mysterious space. In the future, the tarot gatherings might end up becoming a tabletop role-playing game. Klein had never come into contact with items of this level before, so he was unable to determine what would happen if he were to throw the die of probability above the gray fog. He decided to continue intimidating the die, and he would successfully send it to Oravi Island, where there would be Life School of Thought members who had the means to seal it. As for the problem of the mission exceeding the payment he would receive, he didn't mind it. This was because the greatest benefit he would gain was the friendship of the Snake of Fate, Will Ossipton. Backland Harvest Church. Lynn White held a strange badge which was the size of an eyeball and chuckled inwardly. The world sure is long-winded. Isn't it just finding a nighthawk named Leonard Mitchell at Pinster Street in Northborough? He even specially emphasized that the person has a secret and that there's a high chance of me being pulled into a dream. This is showing doubt in my ability. Lynn stood up and changed into a tailcoat and white shirt. He then turned his head to look out the window. Hey, he has a secret while I have mine. I dare bet that Lord Nibs or other earls are secretly watching me. If anything were to happen, they will definitely provide me with help to a certain degree. Being pulled into a dream, Emlyn contemplated for a few seconds before using the materials which were rich in spirituality to concoct a blue medicine. Putting away the bottle and medicine, he picked up a silk top hat and walked out of the break room. After bidding farewell to Bishop Utravsky, he left the Harvest Church. It was still morning, but Backland's sky was gloomy. There was a faint fog that spread like water. Emlyn squinted his eyes and wore his hat, murmuring to himself, "The sunlight is a little blinding." He hailed a rental carriage and went straight for the steam metro station. He spent 6 pence on a first-class ticket to Northborough. This saved him a lot more time than heading straight there. About 40 minutes later, he arrived at his destination and stood outside the door of 7 Pinster Street. Emlyn politely rang the doorbell and patiently waited for a minute. Just as he was about to write a note and stuff it into the hole beneath the door to schedule a better time for a visit, he suddenly heard languid footsteps approaching. Doesn't sound like a servant. Emlyn nodded indiscernibly and took out the medicine he had concocted in advance and cleanly drank it. Then he watched the door open and saw a black-haired, green-eyed man appear before him. He was dressed in home-wear, a white shirt and black trousers. His shirt was untucked, allowing it to flutter gently in the wind. Amidst his suaveness were hints of uninhibited freedom. Although he's a believer of Evernight, I have to say that his looks are barely comparable to a sanguine. Emlyn took off his hat and gently raised his chin. "Good morning, are you Mr. Leonard Mitchell?" Leonard frowned indiscernibly as he looked at the handsome, red-eyed gentleman. He raised his hand to cover his mouth and indifferently yawned. "You are a visitor. I have something I would like to seek your help on." Emlyn didn't reveal his identity, as he smiled with a rather obvious arrogance. This attitude gave Leonard a baffling sense of familiarity. It was as though he had seen his former self, the person who always thought of himself as being the most special, the protagonist of this era. He cleared his throat and said, "I'm only an ordinary citizen. I do not accept missions. If you have any issues, then you can find a private detective." Emlyn White smiled and said, "This matter is something only you can complete." He looked to his sides and continued, "I wish to purchase a mystical item that can steal the beyonder powers of others." Leonard's eyes focused as he asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" At this moment, Emlyn didn't immediately answer. Instead, he surveyed his surroundings and clicked his tongue with a smile. "Impressive. I nearly failed to realize that I had been pulled into a dream." He wasn't in a rush to leave, as he took out the small badge he received from the world in front of Leonard Mitchell's solemn expression. Leonard took a glance as his expression eased slightly. He cocked his head slightly and paused for a few seconds. Silently, Emlyn White saw the scene around him rapidly shatter and vanish like shattering glass. Leonard sneered and pointed inside the house. "Let's talk inside." Upon hearing Leonard Mitchell's invitation, Emlyn didn't show any fear. He held his top hat and wore a subtle smile before entering the house without any qualm. He didn't take off his coat, as a potions professor often brought several supplementary items. It wouldn't look pleasant once the concealment of these items was gone. Emlyn sat down with his starched tailcoat, leaning back into the support as he leisurely said, "Actually, there's no need to go through the trouble. If you have it, name the price, otherwise just frankly say so. Of course, I'm very certain you have one." He chuckled as his bright red eyes reflected Leonard Mitchell's figure that didn't mind the tidiness of his getup. "The feeling of me knowing you have a secret, with you not knowing anything about me, left Emlyn extremely pleased as he felt a strong sense of superiority." Leonard used his fingers to comb his raven-black hair and casually sat on the chair opposite Emlyn. He didn't show any panic or puzzlement as he said with a smile, "At the very least, I need to know who wants it. Perhaps it's me, or perhaps it's my friend." Emlyn tipped his chin as he smiled gently. Leonard squinted his eyes as he cocked his head, as though in thought. Finally, he laughed. "All right, since you've already taken out that badge, I'll answer you frankly. I do have a mystical item that can be used to steal the beyonder powers of others, but I only have that one item. If you wish to buy it, £7,000. No negotiation. £7,000. A mystical item of this kind is that expensive." Although he didn't have to pay for it, Emlyn was still shocked. He nearly failed to maintain his bearing as a sanguine. He automatically converted how much money that could be used to exchange for dolls and doll dresses. After 2 seconds of thought, Emlyn revealed a smile and said, "Teal, consider it. I'll answer you in 2 days. "Sure." Leonard curled the corners of his lips. After leaving 7 Pinster Street, Emlyn hired a rental carriage as though nothing had happened as he headed for the steam metro station in North Borough, before heading back to the bridge at South Borough. Taking off his hat, he looked back at the street which had carriages and pedestrians passing through. Emlyn chuckled and took a step into the Harvest Church. In between a tree and a black street lamp, an inconspicuous shadow suddenly moved, revealing the black-haired, green-eyed Leonard Mitchell. His appearance was silent, but it didn't garner the attention of any pedestrian. "Someone from the Church of Earth Mother." Leonard frowned slightly as he muttered to himself. He paused for 2 seconds before leaving Rose Street, where the Harvest Church was situated. £7,000. Why doesn't he just go rob a bank? Above the gray fog, Klein, who had received the feedback from Emlyn, nearly blurted out. As Jam and Sparrow, he had previously said something similar, but the two situations and the mood was completely different. Using the bounty of the Golden Dream's third mate, Flowery Bow-Tie Jodson, as a reference, Klein inferred that a similar mystical item was worth about £5,000. Even if there was a premium, it would have maxed out at £6,000. Who knew that Leonard Mitchell would directly ask for £7,000? Could it be an item left behind from a high-sequence beyonder, making the act of stealing beyonder powers just one of its effects? No, if that's really the case, the price would start from £10,000. "My dear poet, why didn't I know you as a profiteering merchant? You clearly exhibit a free and easy demeanor and showed no interest in money." Klein couldn't help but sigh. Since he had a clue and saw a glimmer of hope, and how it was something that could be resolved with money, Klein didn't wish to seek out other channels to prevent any mishaps from happening. He quickly calculated his wealth and discovered that it was an acceptable price. Including the £300 advance from the apothecary, the £5,400 bounty from Wormtongue, and the cash I got from the bodies, and subtracting the £200 to be paid to Miss Magician, I have a total of £12,767 in cash and 5 gold coins. This isn't including my 3 soldi and 8 pence in change. In addition, Miss Justice will pay the £2,000 she owes me before the end of the week, as well as the £1,800 for the psychiatrist characteristic. I'm actually richer than I thought I was. Even in Backland, I can be considered a tycoon. Klein inhaled and didn't hesitate any further. He made the cash fly out from the junk pile and land on the table. He carefully counted £7,500 in cash and placed them aside. £7,000 for the mystical item, and £500 for Emlyn's hazardous pay. After going through all the effort to go past 10,000, more than half of it will be gone in an instant. Klein conjured the world and made him pose in a praying manner to inform Emlyn that there were no problems with going through with the transaction. 15 minutes later, a ritual was to be held to receive the bestowment from Mr. Fool. In addition, Klein also made the world warn Emlyn to not be in a rush to complete the deal after getting the cash. He had to wait until tomorrow. This was because he was afraid that the angel from the Zarost family inside Leonard Mitchell would sense the gray fog's aura on the cash. He wanted an airing process, just like back when he gave Emlyn the badge. 15 minutes later, Klein glanced at the cash pile which had shrunk by more than half inside before returning to the real world. It was already 10:40 on a Friday. They were about 8 hours from Orovie Island. It's time to intimidate the die of probability again, Klein muttered, held the ritual, and brought out the iron cigar case which contained the all-black eye. He guessed that Darkwill would suspect something, so he deliberately brought the die to the washroom to deal with it. Seeing the die of probability calm down once again, Klein quickly dealt with the all-black eye and the iron cigar case. After heaving a long sigh of relief, he did a silent count of the time. It should be enough to last until Darkwill hands it to the contact. There's no need to deal with it again. With this in mind, Klein began to consider another problem with a certain degree of concern. The all-black eye has appeared in front of the true creator before, and it has his mental corruption. To take it out once every few hours might cause him to lock onto me, allowing him to send powerhouses to seek me out. However, it was only 1 or 2 minutes each time, so the problem isn't that serious. Even if he senses it, their estimate of the area wouldn't be too precise. When it involves the true creator, there's no way to determine things with divination. I can only raise my guard. Thankfully, this is the last time, and it will take only about 8 hours to reach our destination. Why am I raising flags for myself? Pewee, pewee, pewee. I wasn't thinking of anything. Klein picked up the die of probability and returned to the living room, and saw the chubby apothecary slumped on the reclining chair, looking completely exhausted. As for the owl, Harry, it looked like it was brimming with energy, as though it didn't need any rest. These are the different traits that different creatures gain from taking the same potion. At the very least, Miss Justice has never mentioned that she doesn't need sleep. It's a uniqueness that comes about because of an owl's biological makeup. I don't know much about owls. Indeed, I'm just a keyboard warrior who is only a jack of all trades. Klein sat on the sofa and placed the milky white die into the ring box, and patiently waited for evening to arrive when the ship was scheduled to dock. Time ticked by as the sun gradually set in the west. At this point in time, Klein, who had his eyes closed, suddenly sat up, having sensed an extreme danger befall the area. It had exceeded a seer's spiritual intuition, and the clown's intuition for danger. It seemed to stem from the formless gray fog, which strangely rippled around him. An enemy. Tail devourer Barabaros, or the Aurora Order's saint. Klein opened his eyes as he began considering countermeasures with an abnormally serious expression. Any mistake in a time such as this would require him to consider matters of being resurrected. As for Darkwill and Harry, there was absolutely no way for them to be spared. In the beginning, he hoped that the visitor could only vaguely sense a general area and might not find him or the die of probability. However, when he considered how he was on a ship with no one around on the sea, it wasn't too hard to lock onto a target. The problems would only become worse when that happened, with giving up being the only choice. Above the liner, Space was suddenly torn open as an invisible door filled with complicated symbols appeared. Two pale hands reached out from the door and suddenly pulled backwards, allowing his entire body to walk out. He wore a black bonnet and a classic dark robe, a favorite among elders. However, he didn't look past 40. His brown hair was slightly curled, which seemed abnormally hard. Countless illusory images darted across his dark eyes, as though layers after layer of chaotic worlds were hidden within. As Klein's sense of danger intensified, just the change in his expression frightened Darkwill and Harry enough for them to freeze. He didn't hesitate as he followed the plans he had made for such situation. He leaned forward and picked up the die of probability. Determine the outcome of the malefic visitor who just arrived. I want 1 point, Klein said in a deep and soft voice, and he threw out the milky white die. He subconsciously prayed to the goddess, hoping that the die which had recently been intimidated was obedient enough and played a meaningful role. Meanwhile, he appeared extremely calm, to prevent the die from sensing his anxiety and take the opportunity to cause trouble. As the die of probability rolled several times while producing clinking sounds, it fixed at the blood-red 1 point. Above the liner, the black-robed man, who didn't look 40, had the entire liner reflected within his eyes. He emanated his spirituality and scanned the surrounding. He extended his hand to grab the space in front of him as he suddenly pulled a nearly invisible door. The powerhouse stepped in and vanished from the spot. Inside the first-class cabin, Klein immediately felt the danger distancing itself from him. He couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. He looked at the die of probability on the coffee table and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. If this die didn't have such a negative side effect and could be utilized to its full extent, it would be a divine artifact. As expected of a Grade 0 sealed artifact. As expected of the uniqueness of the monster pathway, only at this point in time did Darkwill find his courage again as he carefully asked, "W, what just happened?" Klein maintained his posture and calmly replied, "There's no need for you to know. I understand. The more I know, the greater the danger I'll be in." Darkwill wiped the cold sweat from his face. There weren't any more accidents in the next few hours. After the sun went below the horizon and the sky became completely dark, Klein finally saw a towering lighthouse appear not too far away. RV was situated northeast of the Rorsted archipelago. The straight-line distance wasn't too great, but the safe sea route had required ships to take many twists and turns, causing the distance traveled to increase by several hundred nautical miles. It was originally a primitive island that harbored many kinds of Beyonder creatures, without any humans inhabiting. After the hunting era came to an end, the Lone Kingdom banished certain criminals there, causing Oravi Island to gradually have villagers and towns. When more eastern islands were discovered and colonized, the area attracted many new immigrants due to the convenience of the sea route and its rich natural resources, making it a rather thriving port city. The light from the lighthouse tower appeared so warm in the dark environment as it led liners towards the harbor for them to dock. "We've finally arrived. My gratitude to the Crimson Moon and fate for blessing me." Darkwill jumped off the last gangway and stepped onto solid cemented ground. To be precise, apart from fate, you should thank the fool and see God for their blessings. Klein held his leather suitcase with one hand as he tapped his cane. Darkwill properly put away the ring box which contained the die of probability, and he didn't delay in asking where the bellman Carnot stayed. He rented a carriage and went straight for St. Draco Cathedral. He then entered the magnificent bell tower which boldly used the colors of red, blue, and yellow. Inside the bell tower, Carnot had a cramped room he could call his own. Knock, knock, knock. Darkwill knocked on the door thrice, eager to hand over the item on his person. With a creak, the brown wooden door opened, and out came a large man who was slightly hunched. He looked to be in his 40s, and individually there was nothing strange about his facial features, but when put together, it was filled with an unharmonious vibe. Klein only took a glance and discovered that his eyes weren't level. His nostrils were of different sizes, and his left facial muscles were slightly loose, causing the corner of his mouth to droop slightly. It was the complete opposite for the right side of his face. Carnot's legs were obviously of different lengths, and one of his arms was thick, while the other was thin. His entire body was highly disproportional, making him extremely ugly. "Who are you?" Dressed in a black robe, Carnot glanced at the duo. "Are you the bellman, Carnot?" Darkwill asked cautiously. Carnot chuckled with one corner of his mouth raised, while the other stayed low. There shouldn't be a second person as ugly as me. Indeed. Darkwill nodded very honestly before laughing. I can tell that you have quite a good state of mind. To be honest, looks don't matter for a man. What's important is their skills in bed. Tusk, that's because you haven't seen ladies who only have fetishes for good looks. Having experienced the era of celebrities of the masses, Klein scoffed from the side. Carnot's expression darkened as he said, I don't wish to discuss such matter. You have problems in that area. No problem. I have different kinds of medicine that can treat all your problems. Before Darkwill finished his sentence, Klein took a step forward, afraid that he would end up being beaten to death. He put half his body between them as he said in a deep voice, he's Roy King's student. T figured. Roy King once described his traits. Carnot made way and invited the two in. His room was extremely tiny, with only a single bed and a cabinet which could be used as a dining table. The washroom was at the bottom of the bell tower. Darkwill pulled out a ring box and handed it to Carnot as he forced a smile. My teacher got me to hand this item to you. Carnot stole a glance at it and was clearly relieved to see 4 points. He said to Darkwill, you aren't as unreliable as your teacher described you to be. I can tell that you didn't attempt to use it. That would have awoken it and make it realize that it's no longer sealed. 74. The chubby apothecary's face blushed red as he honestly said, that's because it's relatively quiet now. In another 1 to 2 hours, it will automatically roll itself. It's best you think of a method to seal it again. Carnot's face twitched. Again. I accidentally dropped it on the ground and then it came alive. Darkwill wanted to glance at his owl, Harry, but he realized that it hadn't followed him in. It was perched outside the bell tower to serve as a sentry. Carnot's eyes clearly widened as his hunched back nearly straightened. How did you arrive here? From his point of view, Roy King's student should have long died at the whims of the die. Darkwill hurriedly pointed to Jam and Sparrow and said, it's all thanks to this gentleman. He's a powerful adventurer. He provided the most effective protection and a temporary method of sealing the die. What method was it? Carnot blurted out the question. Klein laughed and replied, trade secret. Carnot's expression changed a few times as he pressed his hand to his chest and bowed. Thank you for your help on behalf of my organization. Darkwill continued, hiring him costs £1,000 in a request. The request is to help him find a mystical item with powerful offensive traits, but without very serious negative side effect. He will purchase it at a reasonable price. I only had about £300, so that was all I could pay. I'll have to rely on you to pay the rest. Carnot fell silent as the corners of his lips twitched. Only have about £100. Suddenly, there was silence in the bellman's room. The wind from outside blew through the cracks and brushed across the 3 men's face. Finally, Carnot spoke again. Perhaps Counselor Rixardo has the money. I'll lead you to him. From the looks of it, he trusts us. After all, a fate counselor is in no way comparable to a die of probability. If there were really problems with us, there would be no need for us to bring the die over to prevent any accidents and snatch away the uniqueness. Klein watched as Carnot picked up a lantern from the corner of the room. At this moment, he activated his spirit vision and simply scanned the man. Klein nearly pricked up his brows with the sight. This was because Carnot's aura colors were rather unique. There were no problems with his emotional colors, as they were very ordinary. However, his ether body, which represented his body, appeared unnatural. His heart was green, his head was purple, and his digestive system was yellow. It felt like they were different parts which were mashed together in great disharmony. At the same time, Carnot's soul also gave the same feeling. A monster that was stitched up internally. Klein made a rough judgment based on what he knew. After Carnot got the lantern, he turned his head to glance at the adventurer Jam and Sparrow and said without much of an expression, I'm very sensitive to spirit vision. Believe you have noticed certain problems. I'm not a naturally born person. I'm a product of the Church of Earth Mothers' attempts to refine the human body. I'm considered a failed specimen, which is why I do not have the ability in that aspect. His final sentence was directed at Darkwill. Carnot didn't speak again as he carried the lantern and donned a black robe. He hunched his huge body and used the dim light to walk down the stairs of the dark and silent bell tower. Product of the Church of Earth Mothers attempts to refine the human body. But since Draco Cathedral belongs to the Church of Storms, since it's a failed specimen, no attention is paid to it. Carnot turned his back on the Church of Earth Mother and became a member of the Life School of Thought. This is understandable. Both the Church of Earth Mother and the Life School of Thought hold the apothecary pathway, and they will definitely have some overlapping. But why would the Life School of Thought send this fellow, that doesn't seem simple to be a bellman, to the Church of Storm? Is it just a normal disguise, or there's a particular connection between the two? Klein followed Carnot in a seemingly calm manner as he walked out the bell tower and circled round to a stone bridge. Just as he came close to the left side of the bridge, Klein suddenly felt something as he looked diagonally upward. The owl Harry had flown out as well and landed on a tree branch. Catcha! The branch suddenly snapped as Harry plummeted. With great difficulty did it fly up again without falling to the ground. Darkwill was just about to say something when Carnot explained in a deep voice, "Counselor Rixardo is injured, so his powers are somewhat out of control. Once anyone enters a specific range, they will be tainted with bad luck." Carnot stopped in his footsteps as he threw the ring box containing the die under the bridge. "Mr. Counselor, Roy King's student has delivered the die." "Very good." A hoarse voice sounded from deep within the bridge's belly. A silver-scaled palm reached out from the darkness as he held down the ring box which had fallen onto the mud. Following that, he opened the ring box and took out the milky white die. His other hand, which was covered in silver scales, also reached out as he held a piece of a paper-like item made of leather. The item resembled a water pipe, but its ends were connected. It revealed a grayish-white color under the crimson moonlight. Its surface had many complicated symbols and labels, as well as many words in Hermes text which pointed to the Snake of Mercury, Will Ossipton. Fate Counselor Rixardo pulled the item apart and stuffed the die of probability into it before connecting the two ends together. Using fate at a small scale to seal the die of probability with periodic boundary conditions, making it remain in a perpetual state of slumber or calm. Indeed, Snake of Mercury Will Ossipton had foreseen such a situation and had made certain preparations. Klein retracted his gaze in relief, and he heard Rixardo's hoarse voice. "T already know of your agreement, Mr. Jamin Sparrow. T will help you find the mystical item after I've recovered. As for the 700 pounds, I'll immediately augment you with good luck. Go to the few casinos in Arevi and make some bets, and you'll receive the corresponding reward. Remember, do not win more than 200 pounds at each casino. You must not win more than 700 pounds in total. Which is to say that you don't have the money either. Seeing how you're hiding while injured, it's considered normal not to have money with you." Klein nodded indiscernibly and said, "Okay." He waited for about 10 seconds without sensing anything. Counselor Rixardo heaved a sigh of relief and said, "You have become sufficiently lucky." "Is that so?" Klein chose to believe him, and didn't disturb Darkwill's report to a senior of how his teacher had been imprisoned. Based on Carnot's introduction, he found a nearby casino and sat at the blackjack table. After about 10 minutes, he walked out of the casino with a blank look. Not only did he not win money, but he had lost a total of 30 pounds. What happened to the good luck? Why did I believe him? That darn old man is terrible. Klein didn't hesitate to return to the stone bridge and approach its belly. "That fast? You have pretty good luck." Rixardo laughed as he coughed under the dark bridge. At that moment, Darkwill and Harry had already found a nearby inn to live in. Klein replied without a change in expression, "I lost." "Lost?" Rixardo ruminated over the word and couldn't formulate a sentence for quite a long period of time. In the dark environment, an ordinary owl nervously flew over. The two street lamps on either side of the stone bridge silently illuminated the street, but they were unable to disperse the darkness beneath. Only the crimson moonlight from high above could barely illuminate the brown soil. Hidden under the bridge, Fate Counselor Rixardo remained silent for quite a while, making Klein suspect whether he had already passed away due to his heavy injury. He guessed that a large reason as to why the luck augmentation had failed was because of this. Just as Klein was about to ask a probing question to determine the situation, Rixardo coughed and said in a deep, hoarse voice, "You live up to the reputation of being a powerful adventurer capable of temporarily sealing the die. What happened has exceeded my expectation. I'm very curious as to why my luck augmentation on you had failed. Team very regretful that I can't come out and meet you in person. Otherwise, I should be able to see what beyonders from other pathways will find difficult to see, even if they possess relatively powerful spirit vision. This is the uniqueness that the fate pathway holds. So the problem lies with me. That's not the point. The point is that you need to reimburse me £700. No, £730. Klein cursed as he couldn't help but recall the orphan, a demisol, who had the nickname of Monster in Tingen City. The young man, who was equal to half a sequence 9, had cried out after seeing Klein before falling to the ground. His eyes bled, and the fear he exhibited was as if he had seen a devil. This is because of the uniqueness of the wheel of fortune's path of the divine, so he saw something wrong with it. He saw something related to the gray fog. Unfortunately, this fate counselor is quite heavily injured and has a domain of bad luck around him. There's no way for him to help inspect me. I should ask Snake of Fate Will Ossipton when I'm back. Perhaps he might know something. However, this pathway does have the bearing of a charlatan. He might not directly answer me and has a high chance of answering in vague terms. Klein maintained his expressionless attitude and said, "Then, what do you plan on doing?" Rixardo sighed and said, "Get Darkwill here. PLL, augment him with good luck, and get him to win the money at the casinos on your behalf." Using the name of the inn counselor Rixardo gave, Klein quickly found the chubby apothecary, Darkwill. Then, while carrying the suitcase and cane, Klein watched as he kept winning money at the major casino. By midnight, he had already won £750. After receiving the remaining £730, Klein realized a problem. The reason for the luck augmentation's failure was because of him. Why is that so? Klein held close his bulging wallet and frowned as he thought silently to himself. He quickly thought of the thin, invisible grayish-white fog around him and realized the reason. After advancing to faceless, the gray fog has integrated with reality to a certain extent. Not only can it help me screen off ravings that aren't too powerful, but it can also destroy any influence that changes my fate to a certain extent. Therefore, this counselor's luck augmentation was ineffective. According to this logic, bad luck to a certain extent shouldn't affect me either. Hey, what the heck? It doesn't make me become some unlucky fool, but it also destroys my chance of being a lucky man or winner. Klein secretly shook his head and followed Darkwill and the owl back to the stone bridge. He informed Rixardo of how to summon his messenger, and to immediately send him news once he obtained any information on a mystical item with powerful offensive traits. After doing all of this, Klein found an inn at the Oravi Island's port city and got a simple room for himself. Backland. In the morning, Emlyn White walked under his favorite gloomy skies, moving through the thick fog that couldn't be compared to those in November or December, as he once again arrived outside North Borough's 7 Pinster Street. After pulling the doorbell, he straightened his back as he lifted his chin and waited patiently. When Leonard opened the door, he looked at the handsome but detestable face before making way and allowing the visitor to enter. He was still dressed in his home wear, comprising of a white shirt and black trousers. However, he had an additional dark-colored vest draped over him. "Have you considered the matter?" Leonard asked with a smile. "No problem." Since it wasn't his money, Emlyn had no intention to haggle. He even believed that with the attitude displayed by Leonard, there was a high chance of having the price raised if he tried. Leonard gently nodded and smiled. "Very rich. I can tell that you're trying to lead me to say more." Emlyn silently scoffed and replied, "That's not something you need to concern yourself with." With that said, he raised the suitcase in his hand and opened it, revealing £7,000 in cash. Leonard took out each stack of cash and thoroughly checked it carefully. Then he pulled off the red glove he wore on his left hand and handed it to Emlyn. "This is the mystical item you require. It can change colors to disguise itself. TT's called Tinder. It can raise the wearer's charm, making his words be equipped with great persuasiveness. It can steal the beyonder power of a target within 50 meters. The more you understand the target, the easier it is to steal the power you wish to steal. The less you know, the more random it becomes, and it relies on luck. When the target is at sequence 6, there is a chance of failure. The higher the sequence, the higher the chance of failure. After the theft succeeds, the target will lose that beyonder power, and it will take at least 12 hours to recover. The owner of Tinder will be able to use it adeptly for 10 minutes. And the reason why it's expensive is because it has very few negative side effects." Emlyn, who silently took in the introduction, had his interest piqued by a mystical item like Tinder. He asked, what are its negative side effects? Leonard combed his hair and smiled. First, when wearing it, there is a small probability of losing something on you. Second, when using it, a particular Beyonder power belonging to you will be lost for at least 12 hours, but during this period, it will be the only Beyonder power lost. In other words, even if it's used repeatedly, there will only be one power lost the entire time. Compared to the many sealed artifacts I know of, its negative side effects are indeed trivial. Emlyn cleared his throat as he nodded. He received Tinder and checked it carefully before taking out the stacks of cash from the suitcase and placing them on the coffee table. Following that, he placed the glove into the suitcase and didn't take it with him directly. With the suitcase, Emlyn returned to the Harvest Church just like he did before. Once he entered the priest's break room, he set up a sacrifice ritual. The illusory and mysterious door opened as the red glove tore through the dark and deep void, as it was sent directly above the gray fog. At the moment the gray fog made contact with the glove, a tiny, distorted, terrifying face suddenly appeared. It kept evaporating as it struggled to sustain itself. Upon seeing this scene, Klein wasn't surprised. After all, the grandpa residing in Leonard's body was an angel of the Marauder pathway. If Ammon could do it, it was quite certain that he was capable of doing the same. For this, he had made sufficient preparations. He believed that even if the grandpa had really reached Ammon's level, he was able to wipe out the corresponding aura without making him sense the existence of the gray fog, making him take action on Emlyn. Picking up the sea god scepter, which had long been placed in front of him, Klein made the blue gems light up at the same time from a commanding position. Suddenly, silver light bloomed above the gray fog, as the lightning carried portions of the gray fog's powers like a storm, zapping the tiny, illusory face. The face dissipated completely before it could even cry out, leaving behind a dead, translucent worm with 12 transparent rings. Worm of time, but it seems weaker than Ammon, Klein muttered as he beckoned with his hand for the red glove and familiar worm to fly to him. After some serious scrutiny, he confirmed that the worm was basically identical to the one Ammon's avatar had left behind. My dear poet's grandpa is of the same sequence as Ammon. Sequence 1. No, not necessarily. Perhaps this is a unique trait of one of the earlier sequences. If it's really a sequence 1, the notion that Ammon is the son of the creator and a king of angels makes it possible that he has fused with the uniqueness or has another sequence 1 characteristic. Klein made a guess, but he was unable to verify. As for what the dead worm of time could be used for, or when its spirituality would completely dissipate, he could only throw it into the junk pile due to his lack of the corresponding knowledge. 7 Pinster Street, Backland. Leonard Mitchell sat on the sofa with his eyes tightly closed. His legs were propped up on the coffee table, as though he was using a short nap to make up for an entire night of being awake. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly opened his eyes and said with a suppressed voice, "What happened? Have you determined the true buyer of Tinder?" An elderly voice rang out in his mind. "The aura I left behind has been eliminated, completely eliminated." "Did you discover anything?" Leonard retracted his feet as he asked in a deep voice. The ancient voice sighed. "Nothing. Everything was over before I could react. If I were in my best state, I might have been able to grasp the relevant clues. Unfortunately, V remained in a weak state for years." Leonard remained silent for more than 10 seconds before he shook his head. "Then we'll temporarily treat it as if this never happened." Above the gray fog, Klein listened to Emlyn's report and took note of the information regarding the mystical item. He fiddled with the glove named Tinder as he examined. "Heh, this way, I'll have a glove for my right hand," he chuckled as he muttered to himself. After serious consideration, Klein abandoned the thought of immediately extracting the mental corruption of the true creator from the all-black eye. This was to ensure his success, hoping to leave the chance to the moment when he was concocting the Nimblewright Master Potion. According to the records of the City of Silver, even without the gray fog screening, there were no problems with such a procedure. Furthermore, with the gray fog, there wouldn't be any additional accidents, even if it were the mental corruption left behind by the true creator. I can also use Tinder normally. Yes, when I need to use it, I have to put my cash, pocket watch, and other mystical items above the gray fog. I mustn't let any item become lost. In fact, even if I don't do so, the problem isn't too great. I'm a seer. Do I need to be afraid of not being able to find things I dropped? Yeah. In a normal battle, I'll have creeping hunger on my left hand and Tinder on my right. Just the thought of it sounds formidable. Klein reined in his thoughts and discovered that everything related to the sequence 5 Nimblewright Master Potion was ready, apart from the 2 commonly seen supplementary ingredients. He nodded indiscernibly and muttered silently to himself, "I just need to wait for the faceless potion to be completely digested." Then he'll board the ship of Admiral of Stars or the Hanged Man and head east of the Sanya Sea to find mermaids. Investigation Lone Kingdom, Eastchester County, Stone City. Having left the manor, Audrey moved into a villa. After she finished engaging in social gatherings with the local nobles, she sent her servant to the Varvet Bank to withdraw a sum of cash. She didn't need to worry about this any further. She could easily pay off the £2,000 she owed Mr. Fool's Blessed, and she could also pay the £1,800 she owed Mr. World for the psychiatrist characteristic. 15 minutes later, Audrey opened the room to her bedroom and glanced at her personal maidservant, Annie, who was monitoring the servants while they did their work. She looked down at the golden retriever, who was sitting by the side of the wall, and smiled. With a smile, she suppressed her voice and asked with shining eyes, "Susie, you'll receive a gift in a while. Are you looking forward to it?" If it were in the past, Audrey would have definitely said, "Susie, your present is here," making the golden retriever realize that she could find the actual item in the room as well. Otherwise, it was very easy for Susie, who had been studying the basics of mysticism, to guess that Audrey had used ritualistic magic. With this new sentence structure, the situation could have Audrey receive a mysterious letter or news in her bedroom to confirm that the gift was about to be delivered. There would be too many possibilities as a result of this. Susie could read the joy and sincere attitude deep inside Audrey's heart as she subconsciously opened her mouth, hoping to stir the air to produce a voice. She had wanted to inquire about the gift, but she sharply sensed that Audrey's personal maid, Annie, was approaching. The alert Susie abandoned her original thoughts. She returned to the state of being an ordinary dog, as she slowly wagged her tail to express her joy and anticipation. After making an excuse to head out, Audrey entered a chemistry laboratory that she had specially marked out for herself. She placed the psychiatrist characteristic and supplementary ingredients on the table. "Susie, do you still remember the potion concocting process?" She cleared her throat and straightened her back as she excitedly played the role of a teacher. "Woof, I remember." Susie already knew what her present was. In her joy, she barked. Audrey added, "Try to concoct it by yourself." Susie looked down at her paws and suddenly fell silent. Audrey was taken aback before a brief silence ensued. A few seconds later, before the golden retriever could speak, Audrey covered her mouth without any atypical response and giggled. "All right, Susie, there's no need to say a word. I know what you wish to say. You wish to express the fact that you're only a dog and am unable to concoct the potion right." How embarrassing at the same time. Audrey, who wore a charming and graceful external bearing, facepalmed herself inwardly. "Woof." Susie nodded forcefully. Audrey took the opportunity and turned around. Soon she finished concocting the psychiatrist's potion. She had previously asked Susie and learned that she had already finished digesting the potion on Wednesday. That's less than 2 months. Yes, a large reason has to do with how Susie isn't being noticed. She can run about anywhere in the manor or villa and eavesdrop, allowing her to read the true thoughts of the maidservants. That's good as well. She will always share the tidbits with me. If not for her, I wouldn't have known of the dark sides of many people who appear normal and kind usually. Audrey poured the potion into a bowl and placed it on the floor. She watched as Susie went over and began licking the potion. She couldn't curb the anticipation in her heart. Susie might be influenced by the potion and become unstable. But it's all right. Psychiatrist Miss Audrey is already prepared to use placate at any moment. Yes, I prefer the name psychoanalysis. That sounds more professional. Audrey stared at Susie with her beautiful emerald-like eyes with great seriousness, and discovered that Susie's pupils were gradually fading and turning vertical. Dark gold scales seemed to grow beneath her thick fur, and the spirituality that belonged to Susie kept radiating outwards, as though it was interweaving with the entire villa's space. After calming her somewhat nervous emotions, Audrey scrutinized Susie's state. As long as something abnormal happened to Susie, she would immediately use the Beyonder power, psychoanalysis. Suddenly, Susie's voice sounded out in her ears. "Audrey, I'm done." T40E Audrey was temporarily at a loss on what to say. In her dream, Daisy returned to Eastborough and to the old apartment she had lived in for years. She pushed open the door and saw her mother, Liz, and her sister, Freja, doing the laundry diligently. Daisy instantly became delighted and was just about to join them. She was in charge of ironing the laundry. At this moment, she heard knocking at the door. She turned her head and realized that the visitor was a young man in a black and white checkered police uniform. The officer had black hair and green eyes, with a somewhat blurry face. He held a notebook and fountain pen as he asked, "In the Capim case, apart from what you mentioned, is there anything else you didn't mention to us?" "TT's all nothing important," Daisy answered in a rather groggy manner. The handsome officer looked down at his notebook and said, "It's fine. I'm willing to listen." Daisy looked back at the clothes which were hung up, feeling as though she had forgotten some instruction. She honestly described all sorts of triviality. "In the end," she said, "after I was abducted, my mother and sister had hired a private detective to search for me. His name is Mr. Sherlock Moriarty. He's a good man. Although he didn't find me directly, he later contacted a reporter to help me get compensated with the Foundation money." The black-haired and green-eyed officer looked up again and glanced at Daisy before revealing a warm smile. "Very good. Your answer is very satisfactory. Do you still remember the private detective's appearance?" Daisy nodded. Without any alarm, she saw Mr. Sherlock Moriarty standing beside her. The detective had grown a thick beard and wore gold-rimmed glasses. It was almost identical to the one in her memory. After the black-haired, green-eyed officer sized up the image a few times, he seemed to vanish at some point in time without Daisy realizing. For some reason, her mother and sister had also vanished. She ran through Eastborough in search of the familiar figures, but she ultimately woke up from her depression and sorrow. When she saw the dark ceiling of her school dormitory, she lay there in a daze for seconds. Daisy didn't make a sound as she turned her body and buried half her face into the pillow. By the corners of the pillow, a wet stain gradually spread out. The person who had entered Daisy's dream was none other than Leonard Mitchell. Although his investigation of the commonalities of the two cases was to give him time to deal with matters of his own, he didn't forget to act in a perfunctory manner. In the end, he really discovered a problem. In the cases of Lanevis and Capim, a private detective named Sherlock Moriarty was involved, including his friend, reporter Mike Joseph. Although they had only appeared on the outskirts of this matter, it's also a direction for the investigation. Hey, that Sherlock Moriarty looks somewhat familiar. Which fugitive is he? Leonard recalled what he had seen in the dream as he wore his red glove and entered the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral. Just as he greeted the team captain, Sost, he saw a partner approach and hand him 2 thin sheets of paper. "The information regarding the red-eyed man from the Harvest Church is all here." "Thank you. Do you want to have lunch together?" Leonard asked with a smile. The Nighthawk shrugged and said, "No, as long as you stop making me have nightmares." "Deal." Leonard smiled as he received the dossier. He stood there without being in a hurry to sit down as he casually browsed through it. Emlyn White, a vampire, currently under the jurisdiction of the Church of Earth Mother. He once vanished for a period of time. His parents had hired private detectives to find him. Thanks to a particular Mr. Stewart, this matter was ultimately resolved by the famous detective, Sherlock Moriarty. Leonard's smile gradually froze as his expression turned serious. Sherlock Moriarty. He repeated this name in his mind. Klein wasn't in a rush to find an opportunity to engage in true act. He toured Orovie Island's port city with the mindset of a tourist, finding a brief and rare moment of relaxation in his tense life. The city had mostly immigrants from Lone. The cuisine wasn't much different from the east coast of the kingdom, with the only difference being that there were rare fruits and all sorts of seafood here. It was also quite a unique trait of the city. This place was rich in natural resources and was located in a key location on the safe sea route. The standard of living was pretty good. Even the farmers in the suburbs could save up some money through their fruit garden. This didn't mean that Orovie didn't have poor people or the lower class. This class was mainly made up of people who were former slaves. Lone's parliament had long abolished slavery. After chewing a juicy and sweet fruit, Klein watched the sky turn dark. He took a turn at the corner of the street and entered a bar named Sweet Lemon. It was a famous gathering place for adventurers in Orovie. Klein planned on buying the 2 remaining supplementary ingredients of a Nimblewright Master, the relatively common Drago tree bark and Sonya Golden Spring water. At this moment, the bar was rather lively. There were many people holding up cups around the boxing ring as they cheered loudly. There were people who looked like adventurers at the surrounding table. They were discussing all kinds of rumors in hushed tone. Just as Klein was squeezing towards the bar counter, he suddenly heard his name. "M. Sparrow. You should know who I am. I received a treasure map and need to hire some helpers. It's not because I'm afraid, but it's because I can't carry that much treasure alone." A green-eyed man in his 30s held half a glass of liquor and spoke to two men and two women in the corner. It was a mystery if they were merchants or adventurers. "You are also named J.M. Sparrow. Treasure map, why does it sound like a scam? My killing of Wormtongue has already reached this place from Bayan." Yes, it was likely communicated via telegram or visitor. Therefore, many people know of my name and deeds, but do not know what I look like. Cheats are using this opportunity to pass themselves off as me to cheat others. Klein moved over as he came to a realization. The green-eyed man drank a mouthful of liquor and slammed the glass onto the table. "T don't mind whether you refuse or agree, but I hate it when people make me wait. Do you wish to be like Wormtongue?" The young man opposite him said, slightly intimidated, "I know you're a powerful adventurer, so—" The green-eyed man cut off the man's words. At that moment, he felt his collar tighten as he was lifted up by someone and thrown out the door. Klein didn't provide an explanation, as he directly threw the man out of the door with a stoic expression. Then he drew his revolver and aimed it at the spot where the man had fallen to the ground. He pulled the trigger without any hesitation. Bang! Just as the green-eyed man fell to the ground, he saw a spark light up at the ground near his crotch. He was so frightened that he swallowed back his cursing and scrambled away. Without any explanation, his weak performance proved that he wasn't J.M. Sparrow. Klein ignored the victim who stood there in a daze. He politely blew at the mouth of his revolver before stuffing it back into his underarm holster. Following that, he walked slowly to the bar counter in the resulting silent atmosphere. Association Klein sat in front of the bar counter and slammed his fist onto the counter. "1 glass of Southfield beer." Behind him, a few bouncers hesitated about whether to come over to give him a warning or pretend that no one had fired a shot. The bartender signaled to the bouncers with his eyes as he picked up a glass and chuckled. "Why don't you try a cup of sweet lemon? Our boss once went a trier to learn cocktail mixing. He has mastered many of the cocktail recipes left behind by Emperor Roselle, and he has created the most popular sweet lemon in Orevy on his own." Klein wasn't moved as he calmly replied, "I only drink beer." "All right." The bartender wasn't in a rush to get the bottle of Southfield beer as he said with a smile, "Sir, are you an adventurer?" Klein nodded without saying an answer. The bartender didn't hesitate as he said with a smile, "Perhaps you should meet our boss. He's very friendly to new adventurers and is willing to treat them to drinks. Besides, there will be some aid offered to you." Klein, who had come with the intention of purchasing the supplementary ingredients of a nimble right master, didn't reject the offer. He took out a brass penny and flicked it before catching it firmly. He placed the penny on the bar counter as a tip to thank the bartender for the information before slowly standing up and walking to the second floor under the lead of a bouncer, where he entered a room at the other end of the corridor. The room was covered with thick, brownish-yellow soft carpet. There was a faint smell of high-quality coal burning, mixed with the aroma of a cigar. A middle-aged man with his blonde hair combed neatly backwards was leaning on a reclining chair, sucking at his cigar as he read the papers. Surrounding him were 6 bodyguards. Although Klein wasn't a beyonder of the spectator domain, and he was unable to determine any unique traits or the strength of these bodyguards, nor was he from the mystery prior or monster pathway, he could see certain secrets. He could notice things others wouldn't be able to discover, but his spiritual intuition made him believe that these bodyguards were definitely beyonders who could threaten him to a certain extent. The middle-aged man put down the newspaper and pulled at the collars of his black shirt before slowly standing up. He extended his right hand and said, "Welcome to Orevy, my adventure friend." His blue eyes had a smile to them as he looked rather sincere. Klein extended his right palm and smacked palms with him without a word. He was waiting for the man to speak. The middle-aged man pointed to a sofa opposite the reclining chair and chuckled. "I'm the boss here, built Brando. T was once an adventurer with quite considerable strength. I've lived to this day and have earned quite a bit." He's very confident with his strength, thus, daring to directly say it, Klein didn't stand on ceremony as he sat down. He leaned his body slightly forward as he expressionlessly waited for Bilt to begin talking. Seeing no response from the adventurer, Bilt sat down again and sucked at his cigar before leisurely saying, "To be honest, there's a motive behind me meeting with every new adventurer." He pointed to the sea map on the desk in the table. He said with a magnetic tone, "East from the Rorsted archipelago is where the sea gets progressively messier. The strength of the military and church begin to dwindle, to the point of them only being able to protect their own harbors. The sea around here is a pirate playground, extremely disadvantageous to us adventurers. Therefore, I wish to organize everyone to form a loosely connected alliance, so that we can band together when faced with danger. This alliance doesn't have any strong binding term. You can choose to turn a blind eye when other adventurers encounter danger, and no one will punish you. However, if you were to encounter a similar situation, don't hope for help to be provided. In addition, I can promise one point: adventurers of the Alliance will be able to get the prices of the lowest nature when purchasing items from me. When selling their spoils, they will at least get market price." After finishing the description, Bilt smiled at the new adventurer. He chuckled and asked, "What do you think of it? Are you interested in joining this loose alliance?" "Don't worry. You won't need to make any additional payment. Our purpose is only to render assistance when faced with pirates." Klein nodded. "TT sounds pretty good." "Haha, I think so too. I once thought of naming this association the Adventuring Brotherhood, but I felt that Brotherhood is overly constrained, so I changed it to Adventurer Association," Bilt said in a self-deprecating manner. Having said that, he lowered his hand with the cigar and smacked his lips. He shook his head and smiled. "Sorry, I forgot to ask your name." Klein maintained his posture and replied in a deep voice, "Jayaman Sparrow." Jayaman Sparrow. Bilt's eyelids jumped as his smile instantly stiffened. The guards around him clearly tensed up, as though they were facing a formidable enemy. Bilt rapidly composed himself and didn't verify whether he was the real Jayaman Sparrow or a cheat who was only passing off as Jayaman Sparrow. He chuckled and said, "Is there anything you wish to buy? I have quite a lot of good stuff over here." "Sonya's golden spring water," Klein said with a calm expression while inwardly feeling cautious. He didn't mention the Drago tree bark, since there was a high chance of buying the ingredient at herb store. Bilt Brando heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. "Is he? £30 for 100 ml. Trust me, even if you head to Sonya Island, it will only be a few pounds cheaper than this price. Those barbarians from Fasak have sealed off the fountain's source, so it's difficult for others to get any of it." "Deal." Klein had a rough idea of the price of the golden spring water, and he knew that £30 for 100 ml was indeed rather cheap. After completing the deal, Bilt was just about to speak after some deliberation when he suddenly heard knocking. After receiving his permission, a bouncer entered and leaned over, whispering into his ear. Bilt's expression instantly sank, as his entire person appeared abnormally cold. He suffused an indescribable killing intent. Indeed, he has quite impressive strength. If he wasn't a famous adventurer in the past, he was a famous pirate. He should be a mid-sequence Beyonder. Klein looked at him as he calmly made an assessment. Bilt turned his head and said to Klein with some difficulty, "Mr. Sparrow, I have matters to tend to. We can have drinks together if the opportunity arises." "Okay." Klein slowly got up, without any intention of involving himself in Bilt's matter. Of course, this didn't mean that he wasn't curious, but curiosity was never something that could change the way he did things. After leaving Sweet Lemon, Klein successfully returned to his inn. City of Silver, daytime, which was marked by frequent lightning. After Derek Berg finished practicing all the different Beyonder powers of Solar High Priest, he followed the edge of the training field and headed for the Twin Tower. After numerous tarot gatherings, he gradually gained an understanding of the pattern and roughly knew the frequency of the alternating lightning before he would be pulled above the gray fog by Mr. Fool. And now was the final day. Because of this, he had to go to the library to read through historical information involving ancient gods, so as to offer them to Mr. Fool. After passing through the partitioned area of the training field, Derek subconsciously looked inside and saw exploration members resting inside. It was the exploration team led by the 6-member council's chief, Colin Ilya. They had recently finished the exploration based on the information they had received from Jack, and they had returned to the City of Silver, where they were now in quarantine. Derek retracted his gaze with a somewhat heavy heart as he went all the way to the steeple and went to the third floor where the library was. He was just about to walk to the bookshelf that held all the ancient books on legends when he caught a familiar figure through the corner of his eye. It was a fair and beautiful woman in her 30s. She wore a long black robe embroidered with mysterious purple pattern. Her curly silvery gray hair cascaded down. She was none other than the elder of the six-member council, who had been imprisoned for a prolonged period of time, Lovia Tiffany. She swept her faint gray eyes over, as Derek felt his soul being penetrated. He couldn't help but stiffen for a second. "Greetings, Elder Lovia." He hurriedly lowered his head as he pressed his hand to his chest. Lovia walked over and nodded gently. "T have been removed from quarantine." She turned and left after calmly saying that, as though she was making an announcement. Derek stood on the spot as a layer of cold sweat seeped out from his back. Why has she been released? The six-member council has already determined that she's all right. Derek thought as his nerves tensed up in an abnormal fashion. Monday afternoon, above the gray fog. Klein placed his elbows on the armrest as he crossed his fingers and watched as beams of crimson light lit up before receding into blurry figure. Then he heard Miss Justice's brisk greeting. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool Tilda." While Miss Justice was doing the greetings, the hermit Catlia maintained her silence as she observed as she did before. She didn't involve herself in matters, as though she was an outsider at this gathering. She watched as Miss Justice and Miss Magician conjured their Roselle diary pages to pay off their previous debt. Then she carefully glanced at Mr. Fool without daring to look straight at him. Yet she still wasn't able to see further through the special gray fog. Her dark purple eyes were only capable of seeing clothes that were definitely conjured. With the 3 pages of Roselle's diary, Klein wasn't in a rush to read it like before. After all, he had already interacted and used a grade 0 sealed artifact, and knew what a uniqueness of a Beyonder pathway looked like. He had even intimidated such a divine artifact, so he believed that regardless of Emperor Roselle's content, there was nothing that could shock him greatly. Unless he was given a demoness blessing by some powerhouse with a unique ability and temporarily became a woman, Klein joked inwardly as he surveyed the long bronze table in interest. Ma'am Hermit's curiosity is different from Miss Justice and Company. She pays great attention to the matter of Roselle's diary. Klein retracted his gaze and took note of this discovery. Then he casually read the yellowish-brown goatskin. 22nd April. We plan on entering to explore the abyss. 23rd April. We followed the pitch-black ocean, passed through the liquid-like fog, and arrived at the mountain peak that resembled a monster. Behind it was endless black fog. It seemed to blanket an entire continent. However, looking at the bottom of the peak makes it seem endless and without limit. I joked with Edwards that if I were to commit suicide by jumping off that cliff, I might never fall to the ground, forever in a state of falling. Upon seeing this, Klein nearly pricked up his brow. He couldn't believe that Roselle would dare to organize his own knights and sailors to explore the periphery of the region after seeing the abyss. Isn't he afraid of dying? Legend has it that it's a place that can corrupt everything, causing all life to perish. At this stage, Roselle definitely hadn't reached sequence 4, and he wasn't a demigod. He was at best a sequence 5, or even lower. If it were me, I definitely would have turned the boat around and reported it to the church. In that instant, Klein gained a deep understanding of the huge difference between him and Roselle. In addition, Roselle's description of the abyss's periphery had reminded Klein of the mysterious stone doors of Ammon's mausoleum. A similar scene had appeared after the Church of Steam and Machinery's Archbishop Haramik's puppet made contact. I wonder what Roselle discovered there. At the very least, he didn't die from his exploration. He still had an exciting life after that. Klein moved his gaze down and read the remaining content on the diary page. 24th April. We proceeded down the peak in an attempt to probe deeper. The thick black fog is biting cold, as though it can erode flesh and the soul. Luckily, the Dark King I'm on board has certain items that resist this corruption, or I'll suspect that me and my Knights of the Apocalypse will become members of Farron. Undead Legion. TT's very quiet, and we didn't discover anything. 25th April. We saw devils, but they were in the form of rotting corpses. Behind the black, jagged mountain, below a slush-filled opening that one cannot call a path, there were different devil corpses that were either in normal or unimaginable places. TT was as though they had all been killed at the same moment. 26th April. Either corpses or silence, there's no end up ahead. The items on the Dark King has begun to show signs of corruption. T have seldom had fear over the past few years, but here, that fear of the unknown is like an invisible hand that clasps my heart tightly. T have to leave. I have to return. I can't stay here any longer. What happened after this? Emperor Roselle was very successful in escaping the abyss's periphery, or did he encounter something else? What does the abnormality over there symbolize? An intense battle. Klein subconsciously had some sense of anticipation as he flipped to the second page, only to be let down that it wasn't connected. 8th May. My beloved Bernadette is almost 2. The older she grows, the more likable she is. She's indeed a young lady who doesn't let down the excellent genes of her mother and I. Hearing her clearly call me daddy and seeing her bubbly figure, I suddenly felt a sense of satisfaction. Ever since I transmigrated to this world, V done many things. I can say that some aren't honorable, but I've not felt any shame about it, nor have I ever regretted it. On the one hand, this has to do with me finding it very difficult to curb my desires, making it easy for me to be influenced by my environment. I have to thank fate that I've not met a desire apostle from the devil path. According to the records, I would definitely succumb to beyonders of this sequence. I might even be instantly killed. On the other hand, I still have a sense of alienation from this world. My parents in this world are very nice to me. I've also worked hard to make them proud, but I know that my feelings for them aren't substantial. Similarly, this is how I treat Matilda. It's more a possessive instinct rather than love. You have to admit that my mental state is like playing a role-playing game in virtual reality. My parents, brothers, and friends are all non-playable characters. I can devote some of my feelings to them, but never anything serious. Therefore, I can join all kinds of corrupted gatherings without any sense of guilt. I can face people I know well in a cold, ruthless manner. It's just like when I played the Elder Scroll. I could slaughter an entire village just for a chicken. But after Bernadette was born, I realized that I had an additional sense of belonging to this world. I was no longer as estranged from it. This is my child, a living child of mine. Perhaps this is what so-called maturity is. Without children, it's impossible to realize this feeling. No, I don't even have a girlfriend, however. I have to be alert about this state of mind that's mentioned in this entry. It might not exist in the past, but it doesn't mean it wouldn't appear in the future. The higher the sequence, the greater one's godhood is than their humanity. Klein sighed silently as he flipped to the third diary page. 6th January, a brand new year, a brand new beginning. After advancing to artisan, I finally have the powers to do that thing. That is to create the mysterious silver plate in my memory. There's a high chance that my transmigration was a result of it. In fact, after one became a savant, I could already recall its appearance, as well as the strange symbols and patterns on its surface. But the past me could clearly sense that I wasn't able to replicate something like that. 8th January. I finally succeeded after repeated failure. Holding the silver plate filled with special symbols and patterns, I tried hard to inject my spirituality in a bid to activate it. An endless grayish-white fog seemed to surface before my eyes, but nothing happened. Is it a problem with the material, or am I lacking certain requisites? 10th January. According to my recollections of my transmigration experience, I restored my past state, believing that I no longer lacked anything. However, the mysterious silver plate only showed me the strange gray fog. It wasn't able to help me do anything. Since this doesn't work, how did I succeed in my transmigration back then? T temporarily gave up on my attempts, and I destroyed the silver plate I created. Perhaps when I'm a high-sequence Beyonder and become a demigod, I will have a way to interpret those patterns and symbols to figure out the truth behind my transmigration. Yes, I'll definitely become a demigod. I'm the protagonist of this era. Grayish-white fog. The Emperor saw an endless grayish-white fog after replicating the mysterious silver plate from Earth. Klein's eyes suddenly shrank when he read the diary entry. There happened to be an immutable endless gray fog beneath his feet. Could it be that our transmigrations have to do with this mysterious space? But why is the Emperor unable to enter but I can? According to the Emperor's diary entries of the last few stages of his life, he definitely didn't crack the mystery of the silver plate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have not thought of this place when he was in his moment of great despair and mania. He wouldn't have not used this place as his crutch. Klein raised his head as his gaze landed outside the ancient palace. He recalled that deep in this mysterious space, there was a staircase of light that seemed to lead to heaven. It seemed to correspond to his sequence. The staircase appeared to be built for giants, and its destination was the gray fog which seemed to support something that stood in midair. The secret of our transmigration lies there. Klein made the diary pages in his hand vanish before he leaned back into his chair and said with a normal tone, "You may begin." Derek originally wished to bring forward his request to purchase the Sequence 6 potion formula after Solar High Priest, but Elder Lovia's release made him temporarily abandon his plan. He couldn't wait to mention everything that had happened, wishing to obtain the necessary guidance. Considering how this was still the transaction segment, he held back his desire as he waited in silence. There's something on Little Son's mind. Something unexpected happened in the City of Silver. Audrey thoughtfully retracted her gaze, and similarly didn't request to purchase anything. At this moment, Alger surveyed the area and voiced out, "T need the potion formula of Ocean Songster. Indeed, he's already a Sequence 6, a wind blessed. Isn't he someone from the Church of Storm? Why is he looking for the Ocean Songster's potion formula elsewhere? Obtaining it internally from the church is a lot easier. He has secrets he wishes to keep from the Church of Storms. Or was he just pretending to be someone from the Church of Storm?" Katlia instantly had many theories as she gently took note. "T can help you take note." Upon noticing the hermit's response, Alger asked, "Ma'am, is there anything you need?" T can search for clues ahead of time, so as to trade for the potion formula. "What do I need?" Katlia silently chuckled, having sensed that the hanged man was probing her with a very ordinary question. "And he needs meant clues." Ignoring the fact that I've already obtained the potion formula for Sequence 4 Mysticologist of the Mystery Prior Pathway, and accumulating points for one of the main ingredients, even without anything, I have no lack of corresponding resource channels, and far more than one. Catalia had another thought as she recalled the sea god scepter which Mr. Fool wielded. She then smiled and said, "I need a mystical item at the demigod level. The kind with acceptable side effects." At that instant, Alger nearly retorted, asking her not to crack a joke. Even in the Church of Storms, one wasn't necessarily capable of obtaining a similar item for years, much less a Beyonder who was obviously only a mid-sequence Beyond. If I had an item at the demigod level without any real negative side effects, why wouldn't I keep it for my own use? Alger knew that the hermit was using mockery to respond to his attempt at sounding her out, but he wasn't as irascible as his peer. He slowly took a deep breath and said, "I'll keep an eye out. But ma'am, you should know very well that just an effective clue towards such an item might be enough to cover the cost of an Ocean Songster's potion formula." Very staid. Not easily angered. This is very different from the usual style of the Church of Storms. Was the conclusion of my first observation wrong? He's only disguising himself as a priest of the storm. No, I can't think of it that way. This might also be because he doesn't dare to flare up under Mr. Fool's watch. Or perhaps he's just an odd one out in the Church of Storm. There might not be many, but it's not extremely rare. Katlia wasn't greedy. She didn't sound him out a second time as she nodded. "T no." As the conversation between the two came to an end, no one made any requests during the transaction segment. A number of members already had the means to obtain whatever they needed, so there was no need to make any requests for purchases. It was mainly Audrey and Fours who were waiting for the subsequent potion formula. Another reason stemmed from their financial situation or circumstances, and they weren't able to make any early expenditure. This included Emlyn, who was filled with desire for the Sanguine's Vicon inheritance, as well as Miss Magician, who wanted a mystical item. Indeed, as everyone slowly cast off their statuses as low-sequence Beyonders, advancements are no longer that fast. The rate of transactions will also rapidly drop. In the past, there was basically 1 or 2 deals every week, but now it might be 2 to 3 weeks. In the future, it might even be 3 to 4 months. Without knowing whether it was for the better or worse, Klein nodded gently to indicate that it was time to engage in the free exchange. Audrey looked at Derek and waited for him to describe the unexpected situation at the City of Silver. Derek didn't let her expectations down. Before anyone could speak, he earnestly said, "Elder Lovia has been released. I encountered her at the library. Shepherd Lovia has been released. Using flesh and blood, The entire team that she led was corrupted by the true creator, so how can she be without any problem? What is the six-member council thinking? Klein originally wanted to say something along the lines of, if there's nothing wrong with Lovia, I'll chop off my head and gift it to the true creator to be kicked like a ball. However, considering how swears and curses involve deities in them and might lead to terrible consequences, he rationally changed his thoughts. Of course, I don't have to be that careful with me above the gray fog, he sighed inwardly. Elder Lovia has been released. That shepherd. Audrey quickly recalled what the name meant. Back then, Little Son had used blasphemer Ammon's possession and Mr. Fool's help to expose the fact that the entire exploration team had been corrupted by the true creator. As for the team, it was led by Lovia. Her job as a shepherd happened to correspond to the secret suppliant pathway of the true creator. Yes. Derek nodded earnestly as he looked towards the hanged man. Alger thought for a moment before asking, has your chief returned to the city of Silver? Why would Mr. Hanged Man suddenly ask about this? Ah, right. To release such an important figure, it's impossible that the other elders of the six-member council wouldn't wait for the chief's return. If the chief has yet to return, and that they had decided this without his consent, it goes to show that the situation is even more terrible than one can imagine. It was so terrible that they couldn't even await his return. If the chief has already returned, then the reason for releasing Lovia has a high chance to do with the outcome of the exploration. This is because, according to Little Son, this is the only exploration in recent times for the city of Silver. Sigh, why didn't I think of this? Audrey, you're still lacking in experience. Audrey reflected and consoled herself in thought. Yes, not long ago. Derek was surprised by Mr. Hanged Man's accurate guesses. At this moment, Fours, who had been listening quietly, combined what she knew from before and suddenly had an idea. Mr. Son, could this be the situation? Your chief led the exploration team, and that little boy, Jack, to seek out a path that leads to the outside world, but they realized that the power of the true creator is required. Hey, this isn't a lie I'm fabricating, but an inference of the facts. The father of that boy, Jack, belonged to the Aurora Order, and they were seeking the holy residence of the true creator before arriving where you are. Therefore, for the entire city of Silver, your chief decided to release Shepherd Lovia after returning. TF, that's really the case, Mr. Sun would be in grave danger, Audrey said with worry. For his words sank Derek's heart. At this moment, Alger shook his head. No, I have the exact opposite belief. Miss Magician's inference is identical to my theory, but I believe this will make it safer for the Sun. Why? Derek's heart calmed down as he asked. Isn't that simple? Balance? Klein scoffed inwardly. The danger of the true creator is noticeable by any sentient creature with eyes and a brain. Your chief will definitely not put all his chips on him. He definitely needs a force that can counterbalance the true creator. As for you, the one who exposed their ploy, you are possessed by blasphemer Ammon, so you might represent another possibility. The more Lovia and company wish harm upon you, the more the chief and the other elders will protect you. This way, they would turn a blind eye to whatever suspicious aspects you didn't manage to erase, Alger explained simply. This ends up being a silver lining. Fours was stunned. Mr. Hanged Man makes a lot of sense. When it comes to analyzing matters in the situation, I'm still far from matching him. Audrey felt somewhat depressed. She even thought of puffing her cheeks, but she immediately realized that it wasn't an elegant act. All she could do was keep those thoughts to herself. For the rest of the members, Imlin, who didn't know much about Lovia, had a hard time keeping up. However, he knew about Jack and the repeated cycles, so he was barely able to understand the discussion. In order to break out of the City of Silver's conundrum, they released a danger that has the true creator involved. Imlin inwardly made a guess. Compared to him, Katlia couldn't understand a word. She felt as though she was from a completely different world compared to the other member. I actually have a feeling of admiration despite my incomprehension of what they said. The last time I had this feeling was several years ago. Back then, I was still very weak. There were some inklings in the previous tarot gatherings, especially so when it involves the City of Silver, but never has it been as serious as this time. Also, why are they discussing the true creator and blasphemer Ammon so naturally? It should be the blasphemer Ammon I know of. They're only mid-sequence Bayonders. What have they actually done in the past? Katlia's confidence as a powerhouse suffered a setback at that very moment. After hearing Mr. Hanged Man's analysis. Derek first heaved a sigh of relief before asking with tense nerves, could this result in our city of silver being destroyed by the fallen creator? He originally wished that Mr. Hanged Man could provide him with an answer that could relieve him, but he ended up hearing the man say in a deep voice, that possibility can't be ruled out. Then what should I do? Derek earnestly sought advice. Under the situation of us not understanding what your chief and the other elders of the six-member council are up to, I cannot provide you with any suggestions, but I don't think you need to be in such a panic. Alger raised his head to glance at Mr. Fool, who was silently looking at the members from the end of the long bronze table. Tracing his gaze, Derek subconsciously looked over and saw Mr. Fool, whose extremely blurry figure was covered in the gray fog. He instantly felt a sense of serenity, and he couldn't help but recall that holy and powerful angel. Although I've foiled several of the true creator's ploys, I'll definitely not last a second if I were to really clash with him. The situation will devolve into the fool coming to his doorstep, but the true creator finding the fool completely lacking. Klein maintained his casual listening state, without saying a word or showing any expression. Derek retracted his gaze and said to Alger, Mr. Hanged Man, thank you for your help. I will try to figure out what Chief and the others are planning. With the matter coming to an end, Katlia deliberated before saying, was the blasphemer Ammon you were talking about before referring to the ancestor of the Ammon family in the Fourth Epic's Tudor Empire, the son of the creator? Son of the creator? Audrey was stunned by what Ma'am Hermit said. She instinctively turned her head to the end of the long bronze table and discovered Mr. Fool sitting there calmly, as though he was tacitly confirming Ammon's other identity. Adam, the son of the creator. Alger was stunned by the hermit's description, as he couldn't help but twitch his brow. However, he didn't directly inquire further, because this could very likely expose certain matters. Besides, he was very confident that there would be other members asking. The son of the creator. Forz asked with piqued interest. She never expected that Ammon had such a shocking identity, aside from the titles like Blasphemer and King of Angel. She was filled with curiosity over this. Katlia swept her a look and said without a change in tone, legend has it that back when the original creator split into the various deities and races, his body produced two babies. One of them was Blasphemer Ammon. The mural inside Ammon's mausoleum was somewhat different from your description. Back when Ammon and Adam was born, the creator had just awoken and withdrew the authorities of the ancient gods. He was seated high on a holy mountain and was surrounded by angels as they praised him. There were no signs of him dying or splitting. That mural does have something in common with the City of Silver's historical records. Perhaps the creator had really awoken twice. And perhaps the original creator and Ammon's father, the creator as recorded by the City of Silver, aren't the same person. Both of them have an inheritance relationship. As Klein listened to Ma'am Hermit's description, he began theorizing. Ammon is actually the son of the creator. Such a status is in no way inferior to the true God. As for Mr. Fool, our tarot club was able to easily purify his avatar and stop his possession. Audrey recalled the past matters and suddenly felt that she had unknowingly exceeded many ordinary bounders. The circles and levels of knowledge, exposure that the two groups had differed by more than 100 times. She asked with piqued interest, Ma'am Hermit, do you know the other son of the creator? Adam, Katlia answered succinctly. CC0 Audrey was clearly taken aback. This was because her question only required a yes or no. After receiving the confirmation that she knew, she would ask for the details and make it clear that she was willing to pay for it. Who knew that Ma'am Hermit had directly given her the name Adam? She doesn't seem to care too much about such information. She's in control of a lot of information. Audrey managed to infer certain matters through this detail as her eyes darted about. T have never heard of an important figure named Adam. T haven't either. Apart from being recorded as the son of the creator, it's like he has never appeared before. There are nearly no traces of him in the history of the Fourth Epoch, Katlia answered frankly. This Adam is very mysterious. I'm already rather well versed in the Fourth Epoch's 3 empires of Solomon, Tudor, and Trunsost, as well as the angel families that come under them. Yet I've never heard of him before. If it wasn't for Arrows who live-streamed the Church of Steam and Machinery's exploration of Ammon's mausoleum, I wouldn't have even known his name. Has he long perished, or is he hidden in the dark while scheming something? Klein sighed inwardly. Audrey subconsciously glanced at Mr. hanged man and discovered him shaking his head as well. Ammon is a king of angels, so it doesn't make sense for Adam to not be one. There should be records in the city of silver. Audrey looked at Derek. For some reason, Derek easily understood what was on Miss Justice's mind. He said in slight embarrassment, "We do not know about Adam, just like how we don't know about Ammon." T was previously searching for ancient tomes related to the King of Angels. I believe that I was lacking in clearance, as my sequence was still low at that time. I will continue searching for information on this. King of Angels. Katlia moved her fingers indiscernibly as she memorized the phrase. She knew that Miss Justice would definitely answer if she asked, so without waiting, she directly asked, "Ammon is a king of angels that all of you are referring to?" "Yes." To thank Ma'am Hermit for her generosity, Audrey explained in detail. In the records of the City of Silver, the Creator had many angels attending to him. Among them, the leaders of the angels who were closest to the throne of God were deemed King of Angels. We haven't managed to confirm many King of Angels. One of them is the Angel of Fate Ouroboros, who originates from the ancient tomes of the City of Silver. His title is Tail Devourer. The second is Medici, who Mr. Fool happened to mention. We are still unsure of his title. The third is a guess. We suspect that Ammon is the Angel of Time among the King of Angels. Since he is a King of Angels, Adam, who is also a son of the Creator, is very likely one as well. Haven't managed to confirm many. I don't even know the term King of Angels, but you have already grasped half of them. That's not many. None of your sequences are higher than mine. Katlia nearly became speechless. Only at this point did Emlyn really understand the meaning behind a King of Angels. He decided to use these names to seek out traces of the King of Angels via the secret historical records the Sanguine had in their control after he returned to the real world. Katlia fell silent for 2 seconds before saying, "Mr. Sun, you were once possessed by Ammon." "Yes, it was his avatar," Derek answered honestly. "However, he was purified by Mr. Fool. I wasn't injured at all." Purified by Mr. Fool, Katlia couldn't hold back the urge to look at the end of the long bronze table. She originally imagined that she had a general idea of Mr. Fool's state, believing that he was still in a state of reawakening and was unable to use much of his power. This was why he sought the identity of Sea God and obtained that scepter. However, the present situation shook the foundations of her speculation. She felt that Mr. Fool was like an iceberg. What was hidden beneath the surface was even more terrifying and unfathomable. He easily thwarted Ammon's plans under certain situations. He can briefly break through the restrictions and produce strength at the level of a god. Katlia's heart sank as she didn't ask further. She cautiously shut her mouth. At this moment, Audrey had thought of something that puzzled her because of this topic. She proactively asked, "Ma'am Hermit, after Ammon's avatar was purified by Mr. Fool, a worm with 12 transparent rings was left behind. It's said to be a worm of time. Is that correct?" Katlia recalled for 2 seconds before saying, "Yes." "Which pathway does it belong to? I mean, which Beyonder pathway does the Blasphemer pathway belong to?" Audrey pressed out of curiosity. Katlia answered directly without any thought, "The Marauder pathway. Legend has it that at the saint or angel level, they are able to fool fate and cheat the rules, becoming a parasite of time." Sounds very impressive, Audrey marveled inwardly before asking, "Then, what can a worm of time be used for?" "Nice question." Klein secretly cheered from his justice. He pumped himself up as he waited for Ma'am Hermit to give the answer. He happened to have a worm of time in his junk pile. TT's a material with rich spirituality and unique effects. It can be used in particular rituals or be used to create high-level charm. But as for how, I'm not sure. After Katlia answered, she suddenly sighed. She recalled the nightmare of being constantly pursued by knowledge, as well as the massive amount of information that could seemingly burst her brain. But even so, she still didn't know a lot. If the hidden sage hadn't gone mad and could provide knowledge bit by bit, I'll actually be more than happy to learn from him, Katlia secretly sighed. All that matters is that it's useful. As for how it's used, I have other people to consult. Klein controlled the world with great satisfaction and looked at Emlyn. "Mr. Moon, I have something I would like to communicate with you in private. Aren't the transactions over?" Emlyn nodded, feeling somewhat uncertain. "Okay." The world immediately requested for Mr. Fool's permission and successfully obtained the privilege of isolating everyone. Then he looked at Emlyn White and said, I wish for you to present to me every action which Leonard Mitchell made in your memories. Why? Emlyn asked in puzzlement. It involves certain secrets. Klein controlled the world to answer succinctly. His true goal wasn't to buy that mystical item, but to observe Leonard Mitchell. That fellow has deep secrets, the world as well. For an investigation, he was willing to spend £7,500. However, that mystical item is indeed powerful. Isn't the world constantly seeking a way to eliminate the mental corruption in a Beyonder characteristic? This is likely useful. Emlyn suppressed his wandering thoughts as he seriously recalled Leonard Mitchell from his point of view. With Mr. Fool's help, he conjured a video in the form of streaming light. When the streaming light landed in the world's hands, Klein quickly browsed through it. He confirmed that Leonard really knew the existence of the grandpa, but he was unable to determine if he understood the danger. Temporarily suppressing any corresponding thoughts, Klein removed the isolation barriers and allowed the Tarot Club members to continue. At this moment, Audrey was reminded of something by Mr. World's private communication. She hurriedly looked at Fours and asked in concern, "Miss Magician, did you discover any abnormalities at William Street?" "That will require Mr. World to answer you," Fours said, having been put into a difficult position. Without waiting for Miss Justice to speak again, Klein controlled the world and hoarsely replied, "There were abnormalities. But I have already informed the Church of Evernight and the Church of Steam. If there are any future problems, I might require your help." "All right." Audrey heaved a sigh of relief. Informed the Church of Evernight and Steam, Catlia found the description ludicrous. From what she knew, a secret organization like the Tarot Club was a natural enemy of the official Beyonder. There was no room for any compromises between the two, but the way the world had dealt with it, and the words he used had made it seem like the Tarot Club was an organization that cooperated with the official Beyonders. Colored by these feelings, she listened to the rest of the conversation before bowing and bidding farewell when Mr. Fool made the closing remark. Soon, Klein was the only one left above the gray fog.